Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our director of the Hitchcock Center, that wonderful place, um, to our Judy Brooks series. Um, the Hitchcock Center is one of the is it more than 23 buildings now? I'm hoping, because
Yeah, I think I think there's like 34 in the world,
wow.
living buildings.
There was 23, but that was like 2 years ago, some of my researchers, but that are totally produce their own water and electricity. I mean, it's really very wonderful, slowly but surely. Um, Dr. William Spencer, known as Billy Spitzer, who began in July of 2021, so it's been a little over 2 years now, has been the director of the Hitchcock Center. And he had a lot of experience in education, climate communication, network building for more than 20 years at the New England Aquarium. He also worked with another group when he applied for this position. And um, he has really engaged more and more children. And what I'm so impressed with is his strategy for public engagement and climate change centered on climate justice and the engagement of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, the BIPOC community in several communities, not just ours, but surrounding communities, in finding programs. And I'm sure he's going to tell us about something about that. He was also given, and I didn't know this before, in 2014, the White House recognized him as a champion of change for engaging the next generation of conservation leaders, and a visionary award from the Gulf of Maine Council of Innovation. And that's really important. And he is going to talk to us about about how he has gone about this in our community and communities surrounding here. So I'm going to turn it over, unless there's some announcements that anybody wants to make. The one announcement I do want to make is we are going to ask you at the end of this, and I'll remind you again, to not just leave, but also put a commentary, take the quiz so we can have the data to give to the league in general of people who came and what they felt. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn it over to you and mute me and
Okay.
take it over.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to talk to you all, and nice to see a couple of familiar faces. Alice and Cynthia, it's great to see you guys, and meet some new folks. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about what equity means in the context of environmental education in our region, and kind of what the Hitchcock Center is up to and why. And I just start by saying that we're in the middle of a huge transition in how our economy functions, how our society works, how our climate works, and we need to really think about, as we are going through that transition, and energy, and renewable energy, and how we think about buildings and transportation. We need to think about doing that in a just way. And that's really important. We need to make sure that the same people who are and have been disproportionately burdened by environmental issues do not continue to bear that burden. And if we're not careful, that's not going to happen. It has to be really intentional. And one good thing about the Biden administration, they have really embraced that concept of a just climate transition. And what that means, among other things, is that we need to think not just about teaching people about climate change. We need to think about developing the skills that people need for this new world that we're in and that we're entering. And there's been some really interesting work done on creating kind of a green skills framework that's not only about just skills for green jobs, like we need tons of people to install solar panels and build windmills and maintain them and so on. But also we need people to develop the life skills that they need, which includes learning how to collaborate, learning how to adapt to changing conditions, learning how to problem solve, learning how to think about systems. And these are all things that are really, really fundamental, but often aren't really part of the curriculum, and don't just come about by teaching about content. And so the Hitchcock Center, one of the things that I've been really working on is taking this vision that's behind the incredible living building, this vision of a sustainable building, a model of what a sustainable future could look like, and really thinking about how we can use that vision behind that building as a kind of a foundation for teaching kids the skills they need to become problem solvers. Because, climate change isn't just a problem that we face now and it's done. We're going to be dealing with this, like it or not, for quite a while. And we need to help the generations that are kind of up and coming to develop the skills, the creativity, and also the kind of hopeful mindset that's really going to help us get through a lot of these transitions. And that's what I've been really trying to focus the work at the Hitchcock Center on, is how do we develop that skill set and that mindset and those experiences, and at the same time to be really thoughtful about who is it that we're reaching and how do we really help create the conditions for that just transition. So one of the things that I started to do when I got here a couple of years ago was just to do some research about, what are the demographics of our community in Amherst, but also more broadly in the Connecticut River Valley. And, I was really kind of startled by, in Amherst itself, the extent to which the school population, the public school, is really quite diverse, a lot more than I had realized. And actually, when I talked about this to our board, people were really surprised, and our staff were kind of surprised even, that in terms of race and ethnicity, but also socioeconomic factors, and just the sort of general kind of level of need of students, Amherst is actually, has quite a range of students. But then beyond Amherst, I started doing some research into where are the communities, and it even comes down to towns and neighborhoods where there are the highest levels of poverty, the most diversity of race, the prevalence of health problems, the kind of prevalence of languages spoken other than English as a first language. And you can look at all these factors throughout the valley, and you start to find that there are some areas that just you see these factors kind of pile up, and some of the data from the census shows that more than a quarter of residents in the valley have 3 or more social, economic, and health risk factors. And you add those up, and you start to have people who are in a situation of kind of chronic stress, and these things kind of feed on each other. And so when you look at where are those communities, first and foremost, the gateway cities like Springfield and Holyoke really kind of pop out. But you also find that a lot of the smaller towns, a lot of the small rural towns, hill towns, they may not have so much racial or ethnic diversity, but they often have very few resources, and that also creates a lot of challenges, particularly in the educational system. So one of the things we found is when we think about where are the kids who are in the greatest need, it really tends to be gateway cities and small rural towns, and you can see those communities pop up on a variety of maps that have been created to kind of map out where are there conditions of environmental injustice, where people are kind of disproportionately bearing the impact of whether it's air quality problems, or flooding, or problems from extreme heat. You can really see those things kind of pile up. And so what I've started to do is really think about who can we partner with in these various communities to really carry out our educational work. So we've been working, for example, with YMCA in Holyoke, and going down to Holyoke, bringing our educators and programs to kids in preschool programs and in vacation week and summer camp programs. And then, in particular in Holyoke, we wanted to kind of start working first in the out of school realm, because the schools have been pretty complicated with the receivership in Holyoke, which seems to be turning around. And things are getting better. And then we also developed a partnership in Springfield with the public school system, and got a grant to work over 3 years with all of the third grades in Springfield, which is like 100 classrooms, and working with the kids on design and engineering in the context of climate change and sustainability. So it's really, that's about helping kids develop problem-solving skills, helping them develop an identity of themselves as someone who can do engineering and do STEM and maybe be an engineer if they want to, and understand what that looks like. And kids do these challenges in the classroom, and then they can come to the Hitchcock Center and see what a lot of those same challenges look like when you're doing them in a big building. And so that's been really interesting, is to see kids make that connection between something they're doing in the classroom and what happens at the Hitchcock Center. And then in Amherst itself, we've been trying to think about, beyond serving the schools, what are the other ways in which we can reach beyond those families who kind of happen to find the Hitchcock Center. So we started talking with the folks at CREST, the Community Responder Group, and working with them to try to identify other ways we could reach out to residents. We just started working with Amherst Parks and Rec as well, again, to identify kids who are probably being really well served by the Park and Rec program, but aren't coming to any of the Hitchcock programs. And then one of the things that we started doing most recently is working with a really great organization that's a public health group, the Public Health Institute of Western Mass. And they're located in Springfield, and they've been involved for a while in really looking kind of systemically and systematically at health and what are called the social determinants of health in the Valley region, which is really, really important. So one of the things I love about public health people is they really tend to think about, like, what are the root causes of problems. And in fact, they often use a diagram that's actually a tree, where they're actually the roots represent the root causes. So root causes could be about racism or economic disparities, and so on. And those root causes then cause kind of intermediate factors to happen. So you might have chronic health conditions, for example, and then those lead to the things that you see: people showing up with asthma, people showing up with other problems, say in an emergency room. So there's sort of this progression from the understanding the root causes to what are the intermediate factors to what are the outcomes you see. And one of the things the Public Health Institute was involved in for many years was a coalition, a convening coalition around asthma. And as many of you probably know, Springfield was for a long time kind of considered the asthma capital. And so they worked really hard to try to understand, like, well, what's the problem? What can we do about it? And one of the things that they found after doing this for a few years, once they eliminated some of the problems related to indoor air quality and helping kids and families get treatment, is that there's still a big problem with outdoor air quality. Believe it or not, in the Valley, we have air quality problems, and part of that is because we get pollution that comes up from the kind of Northeast corridor, up from New York City. It comes sometimes from the west, from the Midwest power plants, and more recently we've seen bad air quality coming from the north, from Canadian wildfires, and so what tends to happen in places like Springfield and Holyoke is you have highways and factories and so on, all kind of concentrated in neighborhoods that tend to be lower income, more diverse, et cetera. And what the Public Health Institute started to do is develop a network to start measuring the air quality at a much finer scale than usually is measured in the region. So to start installing all of these particulate sensors all throughout the valley to look at what is the air quality, especially the really small particles that you can breathe deep into your lungs. And so I heard about this project and I thought, well, this is really interesting because they're linking air quality and health. And air quality and climate are also very tightly linked because the same things that produce bad air quality, burning fossil fuels, driving cars, are also the same things that worsen climate change. And there are also these feedback loops where as you create more heat, heat and poor air quality tend to be linked. And if you are susceptible, you have any kind of health vulnerabilities, you add those two things together, bad air quality, add heat, and you really have a serious health problem. And so we started to get involved in this network. And there's actually an air sensor now at the Hitchcock Center, which we used extensively last summer when we had all the wildfire smoke, because we had to decide, could our summer campers go outside? We're all about getting kids outside into the natural environment, but some days we had to limit activities or bring kids inside. And we had lots of parents asking us for information about, what should they do? What should they do when they go home? How should they deal with this? And so we saw that as both a partnership opportunity to work with the Public Health Institute and all of their community partners, but also really an educational opportunity to help people understand that air quality, climate, and health are all really linked. What was really interesting for us is that as I started getting involved in this coalition, initially it wasn't really clear what we were going to do. Like I thought, well, this is just really interesting. I want to learn about it. I want to start measuring air quality. But at some point, the folks in the coalition said, we need to do more public education, but we don't really know how to do it. And they turned to us and they said, can you help us? So it was like, yeah, we're right there. We're happy to do that. We started developing some activities that are much more experiential, like the stuff we do with kids, to do with both kids and adults as part of this network. And that led recently to a new project we're just about to start in January that's been funded by the EPA, that is really an environmental justice project focused on air quality, climate, and health in both the rural and the urban areas in the valley. So we're really excited about that. That's part of the Biden administration's initiative to really direct resources to underserved communities all across the country. So we were one of about a dozen or so projects in the New England region. So we're really excited about that. And it's a big grant for us. It's about $500,000 over 3 years, which for the little Hitchcock Center is a big deal. And a lot of it is going out to other partners, including the Public Health Institute. And we're going to be working, in addition to Springfield and Holyoke, working in Amherst and Athol and Orange as well, and doing a lot to engage youth in this project and really give youth the advocacy tools and the information and the data that they can use to really advocate for better air quality, better climate, and improved health. So we're really excited about that. That's pretty cool. And some of the things that we've kind of learned in this process is that schools and other community organizations, and I think the League is actually a really good example, can be really, really important in helping to translate science and policy issues in a way that the public can understand, and really be those points of public engagement. One of the other things we've realized is that young people can really help lead the way in that, but not young people alone. I mean, it really tends to get young people upset when you tell them that they have to be the climate leaders, and they're like, well, wait a minute, we didn't cause this problem. But they are the future of what needs to happen, and they definitely need to be engaged, and their voices need to be heard and uplifted. But we've also learned that to work in the schools need a lot of support. They are really hard hit. We were talking before we started about the impacts of COVID on child development, and kids are really behind, not just academically, but in terms of social emotional learning. But schools are just kind of continue to be overwhelmed with how many jobs they have to do, and we keep trying to figure out how do we help them understand that we're trying to do things that line up with what they're already doing, rather than just adding a whole new layer of things, and really focusing on that concept of skills that kids need to develop, not just learning about content. And I think we're learning is that particularly schools in under-resourced communities really need targeted help. They just don't have the resources, whether it's a big school system like Springfield, or a tiny town like Ashfield. They just don't have the resources to do this kind of work on their own. And so one of the things that we're starting to do is figure out how can we help advocate for more resources to those schools, particularly around climate education and climate action, because that's really, really important. And I guess I think the things that I feel like are sort of most important to sort of leave you with in terms of the most important things that I feel like we've learned and that we're doing. I think one is really being analytical about who you're focusing on when you're thinking about issues like equity and climate justice, and to use the data that's out there from the census, from actually the Massachusetts Department of Public Health has a great public and environmental health kind of tracking tool on their website, and you can get down to really individual census tracts and look at what's going on, which is really helpful across all these different factors. So that's point number one, is really think about who you're serving. And then point number two is really think about partnering. I feel like that's one of the things that we've been focusing on a lot, is thinking about who are the folks who are already reaching the people that we realize need to be reached, whether it's schools, community organizations, public health groups, libraries, civic organizations, et cetera. And then third, I would say, is really focus on skills, not just content. And I think that that's important in thinking about learning about climate and climate problem solving, but I think it's also really important in thinking about civic engagement and civic skills. And I think that's one of the things that you guys at the League do really well, is you help people develop those skills to understand issues and to talk about issues. It's not just about learning the content. It's really about learning kind of those skills of participatory democracy, which I sometimes wonder if we've sort of forgotten about. So it's really great that you guys are doing that work. And then the last thing I'll say is one of the things we've been learning in this air quality project is data is not just about science and numbers. It's really about building the case for advocacy, and that's one of the things that I think it's a really important opportunity, is to think about what is the data that we need to make the case for what we know needs to happen, and how can that data help direct the efforts in a way that is kind of defensible and supportable, and really makes it worthwhile to put the resources behind it. So I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to understand around air quality and climate, for example, is a huge contributor to that is the transportation system. And we need to figure out how in our region we can rely less on single people driving fossil fuel powered cars and more toward regional transportation, renewable energy powered transportation. I think the initiatives around improving rail are really important. and really finding ways, if we're going to have incentives, for example, for electric vehicles, that they really reach the people who need them, not just the people who can currently afford them. I think that's a really critical kind of chain of impact, from collecting data, using the data to drive the kind of policy solutions, and then advocating for those changes. So I'm going to stop there, and then happy to answer questions, have a discussion with you guys, yeah, really great to see you all. I see Cynthia's hand. Is that a hand raised? I don't know who should moderate. Should that be one of you guys? Okay.
Okay, unmute Cynthia. Unmute. Cynthia?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Yay! It's so great to see you, Billy, and you've transformed things at Hitchcock Center. It's really amazing. There are three things. One, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about food sustainability for a place that has farms. Of course, we were hit with the floods, and that was a blow to the farmers. How you're working? Are you working with the farming community? And the other is, I wanted you to say a little bit about the youth climate program that you have, and how you're bringing people in to learn how to do advocacy for the environment. And I can't remember the third. I'm just so excited about this talk. That's enough.
Well, thanks, Cynthia. Let me start with the youth climate work a little bit. So the Hitchcock Center, for a number of years now, has been collaborating with Mass Audubon and others on an annual youth climate leadership summit, and that involves teams of middle and high school kids coming from all over the region in teams, and they come to the summit and they get inspired, and they work on developing a climate action plan for their group that they take back to their school or their community. And it's a really interesting program, because over time, it's become more and more led and organized by young people themselves, and the adults kind of take a bit of a back seat. And so when these teams are developing their climate action plans, they have an experienced youth leader with them to kind of say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about how it's going to get done? And then they have that youth leader as a mentor to them all the way throughout the year. So it's a really powerful model. It's one that was developed by close colleagues of mine in the Adirondacks, a place called the Wild Center. It's spread throughout the country. It's a really wonderful model. And in our area in particular, it is a very youth-led model. And one of the things that's been interesting is that the youth leaders started to realize that they wanted to have a more diverse group of teams involved. And so they started advocating for having the summit happen actually in Springfield. It's been at the Springfield Museum the last couple of years. And this year there were two teams from Springfield who were involved, which was great. And when I was talking about this new project around air quality and climate and health, one of the things that we're going to be doing in that is working with some youth leaders to develop an advocacy toolkit around air quality, climate, and health, so that some of those teams can have kind of a package of resources to start with to do work around those issues. So that's one of the things that we've been trying to think about, is how to really give those youth leaders more resources to work with, and then let them go, because they really are very, very self-motivated. So that's a program that we're really excited to continue and to really build on. Then your other question about food and farming is a really interesting one. And I actually live in Hadley now, so I'm surrounded by farms and farmers. And I'm also good friends with Lev Ben Ezra, who runs the Amherst Survival Center. And she's talked to me a lot about issues of food insecurity, in Amherst and in the region. Yeah, it's really interesting because on the one hand, our area has this great potential to be, in many ways, much more resilient to climate issues because so much of our food is locally grown. And we're also vulnerable because those same farms are vulnerable to flooding, like we saw this past summer, and in other years we've seen extreme drought. And one of the things that I've learned is that the farmers who are still here, they are really very adaptable folks. They really join together to help each other, and it's really quite impressive. And I have to admit, I haven't figured out yet, what role, if any, is there for the Hitchcock Center to help strengthen that food system and that farming system. But that is something I'm on the lookout for.
Before you take another question, I want to alert you that the League of Women Voters of Amherst has civic grants up to $2,500, and it's just on a rolling basis. And so we can give money for anything that is in line with our program positions. And so I think a lot of your work probably is, especially the youth and the advocacy work that you're doing. And so it's a 1-page grant application.
Cool.
So it's super simple and we try and make it very straightforward. So
Wow,
I encourage you to
great.
look at
I will.
that.
Yeah.
Other questions? Oh, Martha.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm just amazed. I had just no idea that you were doing all these things. It's just terrific and really very, very exciting. I mean, I'm afraid my few visits to the Hitchcock Center have been things like making friends with Maisie the snake and so on, But the food and the farming, I have recently been on Amherst's solar bylaw working group trying to make recommendations about, where solar panels should or should not be sited and so on. And farmland was a big thing that we've been wrestling with. On the one hand, one could argue that, we need more solar arrays, but really climate resilience means we need the farmland and we need more rather than less and so on. So the agrivoltaics is a very interesting thing that's coming along now. I had the pleasure of visiting a farm in North Hadley that's just had 2.5 acres now of patch with solar panels up above, and
they're around the corner from me.
Pardon?
They're right around the corner from me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you visited them. Have you?
I have. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I must say that the broccoli growing under the solar panels looks great. And
it does.
It's right now it's very challenging because it's a new field, and in this case, it was one particular dedicated person named Jake Marley from Hyperion Systems that is very dedicated to helping farmers make it work. And he can succeed, but the permitting process and the complexities are very large right now. But it's a real concern that we really don't want, at least to me, don't want to have large-scale solar arrays replacing crops or replacing forests. The UMass recently had this solar forum for 4 sessions. I don't know if you listened to any, the recordings.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
But I mean, it stated that 60% of the large solar arrays over the past decade have gone on previously forested land, and a lot of development, housing developments or other development has gone on forested lands. And so the Audubon and others are really concerned about that. So I don't know whether you get involved in any of issues like that at all, or that's more sort of the large scale advocacy, I guess, that
Well, it's a great question. We just had a talk last week by Steve Roof
yes,
from
yes.
Hampshire, who's on the Amherst, Energy and Climate Action Committee, and he gave a talk where he basically looked at the state's climate plan, as well as a couple of these recent reports from Harvard Forest and Audubon, and there was one from Nature Conservancy about solar siting, and kind of unpacked it all, and it was really helpful. And I feel like what I want to have the Hitchcock Center do is be a place where those issues can be talked about, and some of those studies and issues can be kind of unpacked for people in a way that's non-partisan and non-confrontational, enable people to actually learn and absorb some of the ideas and talk about them and ask questions. I'm not quite so sure that the Hitchcock Center is in a position, it doesn't have enough expertise really to take a position on a lot of these issues, but I feel like that issue of appropriate and sustainable land use is really, really important for this area. I mean, it's really, really central. And, I think we have to be able to hold more than one idea in our heads at a time. Like, yes, we need more solar, and we need working forests, and we need working farms, and we need livable communities. And, it all has to work together somehow. And there are always trade-offs that we have to make. And I think the town is doing a great job of trying to figure it out. The one thing I find really frustrating in our state is that 351 municipalities have to each figure this out on their own. It's just kind of crazy. I know the state is trying to provide some more support and guidance, but this is an issue that should be really solved much more on a regional basis. I think not just town by town. It's just too micro scale. So I don't have an answer for that, but I kind of wish it were something we could address at a more regional level and kind of realize like, oh, okay, well, here you can have concentration of forests, and over here you can have concentration of farms, and here's a great place for people to live, and you can start to work it out as opposed to trying to work it out for each town.
Yes, well, I have certainly had many discussions with Steve Roof. I think he's
yeah
real keen on the large solar. I mean, of course, Hampshire College has done it. I'm more on the side, well, really, maybe we could think more in terms of some of the smaller arrays. And right now, there's really efforts. What we really need to do is get them over all the parking lots. You think of all the paved areas.
Yeah, and the thing that's hard about this whole thing is that, as Bill McKibben, really well-known climate activist, said, this is a time test. Like, we don't have the luxury of time to wait and figure all this out. And so, we have to accelerate the development of renewable energy. And at the same time, we have to make decisions now that are reasonable decisions for the future. That's the thing that's really hard. It's like, you cut down the forest, it's cut. You could let it grow back at some later time, but it's going to take a while. So these are tough decisions. There's no question about it. I personally tend to lean on the side of, I feel like we tend to run into trouble when we assume that we can disrupt natural systems and make them better somehow, and so I kind of lean on the side of, personally, of let's try to maintain well-functioning old growth forest and not cut it down. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
That's
my personal opinion.
Yes, but that's when our group did a public survey that around Amherst, that was resoundingly what came out, was that people want the forest preserved because that's how you preserve the ecosystems.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay. Well,
Jeff,
enough for me.
Jeff, you have a question or response?
I think you're still muted, Jeff.
There we go. Okay. The famous words of Zoom. You're muted. Well, thank you very much for participating in the Judy Brooks series, first of all. And in the earlier part of your presentation, as you were talking about the Hitchcock Center and your work with more diverse communities in Springfield, in particular, where I spent a good part of my career, it began to occur to me that and your talk about how climate impacts health in particular, I began to think of the ACEs study. I don't know if you're familiar with the ACEs study, but the Adverse Childhood Experiences study.
Yes. Yeah,
and
okay, yes.
And it which came out in the mid 1990s, I think, and had a huge impact on our. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade, but it had a huge impact on this on the clinical field. And it seems to me that the way that you talked about climate and its impact on health, and particularly child health in terms of asthma and related, breathing issues, fits in, unfortunately, very much with the ACEs study. And I'm just wondering if you've ever thought of it in that way, and whether you've tried to make inroads into basically the trauma field to introduce this area as an important field of study.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've been talking to some of the folks who work at the UMass Center for Research on Families, and that's one of the kinds of questions that I've been interested in, is thinking about where is there an intersection between kind of the work that we do with kids and families and some of these kind of active research areas around kind of child development and health and so on. One of the things I'm really interested in is what are the factors that help make kids more resilient in the face of these adverse circumstances, and what are the things
if you discover that, you will be in a field alone, and it would be wonderful. Bottle it and sell it. So
well, I think I think there have been some research studies on those kind of questions of what builds resilience in young people. But I think one of the things that's interesting is to think about, if you create opportunities for kids to both become kind of more skilled, more empowered, and actually do things to change the circumstances that are causing the problems, that's where I think it starts to get interesting. And one of the things that we're going to do in this new air quality project is connect with some of the urban forestry work that's going on in Springfield and other places. And so, literally, kids can help plant trees that improve air quality and reduce problems with extreme heat. And you got to think that starts to be a good positive cycle of intervention. But we're just getting into that work. And I've also thought about the connections between climate, health, mental health as well, as well as environmental health. And that's something I'm interested in exploring more. So, so at least I feel like now I know who to talk to. Like I know some of the folks to talk to in the health and the public health fields, but haven't quite explored it all yet. But that's a great question.
Yeah, that's great. I sincerely hope that, you've said so many things that could fill up a couple of lifetimes, it seems to me, in terms of endeavors. But that's one that's closer to my own heart.
Yeah. No, thanks. Yep. That's really helpful.
Thank you,
Rebecca.
You had talked about trying to figure out how to support schools, and the league has also discussed this. I am married to a teacher, and I know that teachers just don't feel like they have any time to do anything They're at the high school, they now are on quarters instead of semesters, and they're trying to pack more things into smaller periods of time. And we have offered to, do things, and it still doesn't matter. They just don't have time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how are you able to do your outreach?
Yeah. Well, it is challenging. I mean, even when you're coming in and you're offering to help teach things, say, we'll teach this, we'll show you how to do it, we'll give you materials. Even just the scheduling of some of those things is really complicated. I know we encountered this in Springfield last year. They were like, I don't know, 2 to 3 months that were just like off limits because of MCAS testing. It's like, well, either preparing for it, doing it, or like recovering from it, I think, we're starting to realize that at some level, we have to be involved in the kind of advocacy for changing the school environment, and I know that, we haven't gotten deep into that, but, because the current system is just really, really tough to work with for everybody. It's kind of the just accumulation of more and more jobs that the school is supposed to do, more and more standards, more and more requirements, and there's just not enough resources to do it. And so we try to be as supportive as we can when we go into schools, to work with teachers, to help them understand we're not trying to ask them to do yet one more thing. We're trying to support things that they're already trying to do themselves. But it is tough. It is definitely tough. We try to make sure we have the support of administrators, and try to show that there's a benefit for the kids, at the end of the day. Yeah, I don't have an easy answer for that one.
How do you find, so I know you had worked with Holyoke also as well as Springfield. How do you find the reception in the schools of the kids, not the teachers, but the children? How is that?
Yeah, I mean, kids tend to get really excited when there's something, somebody new in the classroom. So it's not hard, in a way. And a lot of the things that we bring into schools are kind of fun and exciting. I mean, a lot of the engineering challenges we do there, kids are getting to work in teams and collaborate and do stuff with their hands and, activate, skills that maybe they didn't know they had. Often kids who are not that, considered, that advanced academically do great in that kind of a situation where they're working with their hands, they're coming up with ideas, they're building things, they're working with their peers, they're trying to be creative. So that often tends to work really well. And, it's in some ways we have a little bit of an unfair advantage because we come in with all this exciting stuff to do some limited things, and then we get to go away. So, that makes it a little bit easier for us, I think, to kind of make it happen. But we do try to, as much as we can, help, model for teachers things that they can do on their own, give them ideas, give them resources, give them skills. We're producing all these kits for Springfield to leave behind with the teachers so they can do some of the stuff on their own. So yeah, I think, generally, positive reception from kids is not the problem. Although one thing I have to say we have encountered more than we thought is realizing that kids don't always have the reading skills that you might expect, given the age of the kids. And some of that is sort of the COVID kind of hangover effects. And some of it is just realizing that, that transition from when kids go from learning to read to reading to learn, that is getting delayed for a lot of kids. And so we're, like in the third grade, we're right on the edge of that. So we've been having to develop different ways for, of communicating stuff. So less stuff kids have to read, more stuff that, we or a teacher will read out loud, for example, or, things that are more symbolic and fewer words and so on to explain things.
Cynthia? Unmute.
I'm unmuting.
okay.
There I am. I'm
You
getting
got it.
better. I don't mean to hog this, but it's such a great experience to be hearing Billy and haven't seen him for a while. So I wanted to ask you, Billy, is there some way that you could foresee the League and Hitchcock Center and maybe other groups as well to be in some sort of partnership, collaboration? I mean, that's one of the things that we're really working on also. And I know that that's one thing that you are interested in. How can we expand our network?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd love to figure out a way that the Hitchcock Center could be, even more of a place where people convene to talk about issues, especially related to environment, climate, sustainability, health, and so on. And I feel like we, the Hitchcock Center, don't have a big enough network. So I'm really looking for ways to partner with other networks of people who, maybe they don't know about the Hitchcock Center, but they know about the League, or they know about another group and they want to come together. So if there's some way that we could figure out how to, co-sponsor, co-host, whatever it is, collaborate, I would be really excited about that. That'd be really, really interesting.
I'd like to see us do something along that line, and maybe Rebecca and the steering committee could figure out a way that we could sit down and have a talk about it, look at some possibilities. And I see Dana, you're here. Are you still with the Girl Scouts? You
I
are?
am. Yes.
Well, that's
I am.
another group. Yeah. But there are all these little networks that
Yeah.
we could pull together.
Yeah. I'd love to learn more about, who you guys reach, who you want to reach that you don't reach, what are the mechanisms that you have found most effective to connect with people. It sounds like these candidate forums are really successful. I'd love to talk about ways we could work together. I really like the fact that you guys are nonpartisan. I think that's really helpful. And I think that's a good space for Hitchcock to be in as well. Yeah,
Okay.
so I'd love to follow up and talk more about that.
Dana, you had your hand up also, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Billy, so much for making the time. Thanks for everything that you do. The Hitchcock Center, I think, is an amazing place. I appreciate you sharing it. And I am just wondering, when you bring kids to you, I think it's awesome that you're going to where kids are. And but you mentioned them coming to the center. How do you get them there from these rural communities, urban communities?
The simple answer is a bus.
Do you have a vehicle, or
we don't have our own. We try to get funding when we can to make it affordable for the schools. So like for this big project in Springfield, we have a big chunk of money for school buses, literally, and we're trying to, we're sitting down with First Student and negotiating bus rates with them. So we got a big volume. What deal can you do for us? And then that's something we build in when we're trying to get funding. But yeah, I know at some point the Hitchcock Center did have some kind of a bus that was used for outreach. It's really tough it's a big challenge to kind of maintain that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, there's a lot else that goes into the liability and the upkeep.
Yeah, there does.
Everything. But I feel like that's such a big barrier for
it is. It is. It is. It's buses and time are both challenging. I'd say that, we tend to use a field trip to the Hitchcock Center as like a culminating activity after kids have done a lot of stuff in the school. So it's not like we're relying on that kind of day in, day out. But Yeah, that's a really good question. There is sometimes funding, particularly for bus transportation for educational programs, but that's usually we're building it into other projects.
Yeah,
Other
great.
grants.
Thank you. I'll also
Yeah,
just
welcome.
say congratulations on your EPA grant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Thank you very much. We're really excited about that collaboration. So it's a big honor and a big responsibility, both.
Billy, we have a comment in the chat from Rebecca
Okay.
Todd, and she is from the Connecticut River Conservancy.
Yes, I
saying she would
recognize that
welcome
name.
partnering.
Sure,
So you can put that into your notes.
I will. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I've really loved about coming to this area is there's so much appetite for collaboration and partnering. It's really wonderful. I feel like people really do want to work together to solve problems in common and figure out how to, improve quality of life and equity. And it's really wonderful. It makes my job a whole lot more fun and really interesting. So I really appreciated that. I felt, being a relative newcomer, I just felt really welcomed, and people are excited about working together, which is great.
Dana?
Can I do one more ask? So I remember when I was on the board, there was so much talk about how do we reach out to communities that are most affected by pollution, environmental degradation, and so forth. And I don't know if have you all continued to look at this, figure out strategies to do that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When I was talking earlier about kind of these sort of environmental justice sort of mapping resources, you really, at the end of the day, things are just co-located. Where you have social, economic, health, environmental problems are all tend to be kind of concentrated, and even down to very particular neighborhoods. And so that's the kind of data that we've been using and thinking about, which communities do we want to work with? As I was saying, the gateway cities really pop up in particular parts of Springfield and Holyoke, for example, as well as Westfield, Chicopee, et cetera. And then, some of the rural areas are not so much burdened by pollution per se, but they tend to have more climate vulnerability. So in terms of infrastructure, you think about the places where the roads have washed out and the bridges have washed out, and there's damage to farms, to buildings, to homes. They tend to be often rural, low income areas that just and sometimes it just comes down to like the culverts were built for a different era, of smaller storms and so on. So we use those maps of economic, social, health, environmental conditions all the time to try to understand who we're reaching and who we're not reaching, and how we can prioritize communities that are disproportionately impacted. I mean, it's an impressive amount of data that's available now to do that. And I'd say the Massachusetts Department of Health has probably the best that I've seen in terms of our state really be able to look at environmental health, all these conditions kind of all at once, and you can just layer the maps over each other, and really look at whatever aspects of it that you want to focus on.
Okay, another hand. Oh, I think I remember talking to you about this also, when Cynthia was talking about groups. I was thinking of the seniors in this area having time, and maybe finding a way to connect, and maybe through something like Neighbors or the League or some other place where there are quite a few seniors involved, maybe people who don't have to go to work every day per se,
right.
but it's a possibility of trying to collaborate to some level.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I'd love to.
I'm saying Adele and Alice, and then Alice.
Hi, thank you so much. This was fascinating and encompasses so much. And I wondered how much you're involved with Hampshire College being located where you are and their focus on environmental justice. And I know that's a big thing for them. So whether students are very involved with the Hitchcock Center or?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of relationships that had been built years ago, which kind of fell by the wayside when Hampshire was kind of struggling for a bit, and then COVID, and a lot of those are kind of getting rebuilt now with kind of new faculty and new folks, and so for example, this year, Steve Roof and Sarah Draper, who is the manager at Sustainability Hampshire, they're teaching a course which is involving the students in making recommendations for Hampshire's sustainability plan. And a bunch of those students are coming over to us to get ideas and resources and so on. And then, we're also involved in a number of other courses and student projects and things like that. So things are starting to kind of get re-energized around that. And it's so interesting because, Hampshire in many ways has a very similar, kind of mission and mandate. It really wants to help kids think about and figure out ways to tackle these big social problems. And one of those areas of focus is climate. And we're really aligned, with a very similar set of ideas. We just happen to be working with slightly younger population. Yeah, we're trying to collaborate more and more with Hampshire as best we can. We have a ton of work study students who come and work with us.
Oh, you do?
And they also help. I think what we're finding is that students telling other students is the best way to get the word out about what we're up to. And then we have a lot of good faculty relationships we're starting to kind of build on now. But it was only this year that they started hiring like a new environmental new person on the environmental.
Well, they're building back up.
They are absolutely building back up, which is great. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Alice?
When you're talking about older people, I live at, sorry, my brain goes off when I think of things. I live in Applewood, and my first thought was, oh, we have so many things already, we can't possibly start anything new. But it's really, there are a number of people who like to go walking and various, some in short walks and some longer walks. We have a sustainability committee that is very active, and other groups that talk about climate. And I can't really think off the top of my head, but there is a lot of interest. And I'm not suggesting anything particular, but I just wanted to put that in as a place that where there are a lot of people that have an interest in all of these different issues.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. I mean, yeah, we love working with Applewood. I mean, you guys are great neighbors. We're happy to come over and talk about things. We're happy to host you guys. Whatever. I know you guys do have a lot on your plate, but yeah, we're right there with you. Happy to help.
Actually, I think you did come for a Saturday morning program.
I did.
Yeah.
Yep, I did.
Nice.
Yeah. Soon after.
Yes.
Yeah. But
I did appreciate
happy to come back. Happy to have other folks come.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Excellent.
Let me see if I can. Oh, I did.
Are there any other questions or comments or suggestions? I just think that possibly through the league, we can do some things together, or at least kind of serve as a some kind of to help some of those. When you work
Yeah.
with students from Springfield, Holyoke, and other places, do you find a reception with some of the communities in which the children live in? Because
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think we've been doing it long enough or kind of deeply enough yet. Like I kind of would that would be a really great thing to start to see happening. I've sort of seen it from another direction, which is in working, like the Public Health Institute has a model where they bring in what folks they call resident advisors, who are community residents and activists of various kinds who become really important advisors to all the projects and collaborations that they put together. So on this air quality project, at every meeting we have, there's always at least a handful of community residents who are there. They really are advocating for more education for kids. Like they see that as a really important part of the solution. So they're looking to us and saying, "Heck, can you do more?" So we've been seeing it kind of from that direction. But one of the challenges in big urban school systems is just the family involvement is really tough. I don't really have an answer for that yet. Like, I think we need a longer and deeper presence in the school to start to see that to happen, where the parents and the community are sort of seeing the benefits. So I think that's a longer term project, longer term outcome.
Okay. Anybody else have questions, comments, or we really do appreciate this. I even from the time you talked, with me before, there's so much has been happening, and this is exciting, and I think Amherst schools, it could be really a positive thing for them also, but this is, I think most young people are interested in things like this because they know that this is their future,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And they know more than many of us did when we were younger.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I can see that working. I really can.
Yeah. Well, thanks. You guys are a great group to talk with. Really great questions, great discussion, really, really thoughtful points. Thank you.
I think what the series was named after, Judy Brooks, she would love that, because she loved children. She was a teacher, but she was also active in so many things, the league, as well as she served on for the town and did many things. And that's one of the reasons that we named the series after her, because she was very interested in development of this town, but also of children. So I just want to make sure, and that's something we need to remind, because everybody doesn't know. I know a lot of the people here that I know, several of you know that, but I'm trying to remind people who don't know that, she was very, very much active. She's the one who dragged me everywhere. She tried to get me to sign up for a club. I'm in the pool. I mean, it was that kind of thing. And I used to help register people at the Survival Center. That's how I even found it, and so I have fond memories of her pushing me. And it was really helpful, because it was what I do when I did in New York, and it was nice to be doing things with her. So, just wanted to give a shout out to her, also. Also, please do not leave this meeting without going through it's a very short little thing at the end that just gives you data of how you felt, about whether you learned something, it was whatever. And we do submit that also. So it would be important. It only takes about 3-5 minutes at the most. So we'd appreciate it before you leave, that you go through the little blurb where they ask for how you felt about the meeting. Okay, unless somebody else has a thing, but we'd like to thank you very, very much. This was so informative.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Great to see you all. Great to see some, many new faces and some familiar ones. So thank you very much.
Okay,
And I look forward to collaborating more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Lee.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.